Hello everyone and welcome to my video where I talk about what I watched for Halloween 2024. Now Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, particularly because of the movies. Now unlike Christmas where you kind of have to watch something tangential to the holiday to feel in the spirit, Halloween you just have to watch something horror. So it's a holiday that's very open and I get into because I love movies and I love horror movies. And before we get into what I watched, I just wanted to say to anyone who are returning viewers of the channel, I am working on a bigger project review. In fact, it's one that's really big. That my last big one was 30 pages, and this one is about 32 pages right now. And it's one I'm covering multiple movies in, and I still have one movie to cover. So I'm expecting a 40-minuter, somewhere around 43 minutes or something. It's kind of heavy, but I'm hoping to get it out by December. It's about found footage, and I hope you'll like it. So, without further ado, let's get into what I watched this month, outside of what the materials I watched for my upcoming review. Oh, also before we go anywhere, I forgot to say this, but tell me some of the movies you watched for this year for Halloween. Tell me some of your favorite Halloween movies or any traditions you have to watch for Halloween. I'd love to get some recommendations, so hey, feel free to comment them in the comments. So, let's start with what I first watched, which was Door. Now, Door is one you might have heard me talk about in my last video where I talked about movies that I got from the UK. Let me set my phone down. Door. Now this is a compilation of Door 1 and Door 2 from Third Window, but I didn't get the chance to watch Door 2. Well, I'm recording this on the 30th at midnight, so who knows? I still have 2 more days at least. But I watched Door 1. Now Door 1 is a movie from the 80s, and it's a movie from Directors Company, a small studio where directors were sort of pushed to think like producers. And this one was pretty contained. It was one mainly centering about the home where the woman is a mother and her husband is off at work a whole lot. And she's taking care of a real small child. But when she closes the door on the hand of a sort of pushy salesman, well, the salesman becomes a stalker. And it goes, where do you think from there? It's a movie that plays with your paranoia a bit. She didn't get to see the face of the salesman so clearly, and he calls on the phone, so really anyone can be the salesman to her, even though not necessarily to the viewer, but you understand the fear to her. And they portray that in a unique way. Because she heard him on the phone, a lot of the other characters have a phone filter over their voice. It's an interesting effect because outside, she doesn't know who's there. The guy can be outside. A lot of stuff is sort of played in a unique way where they drag some of the horror, but it feels authentic in that sense. It feels really human, which is something that I like. And it's good for a lot of it, but in the third act, it hits it to 10. It goes from good to great. Definitely becomes a great thriller by the end. It's worth a watch. I think it's even free on Tubi, so really you have no excuse not to. I think you ought to check it out. And I ought to check out Door 2. Also, it has a really great long panning shot at the end that the DVD menu kind of spoils, at least on the Third Window copy. So click off the window real fast. Click play movie real fast so you can enjoy it before all the shock of that beautiful shot. And next up, I saw Deadware. Now, this is a movie that I saw with my girlfriend. For those who don't know, my girlfriend's in Britain, so we watch movies together via Discord, streaming a movie. And Deadware is a movie kind of closely related to a movie I'm reviewing next up in my big long review. Deadware is a movie that is a screen life movie. For those who don't know, it's a movie told with characters through webcams, and it's like a desktop capture. So think found footage, but on the computer. And I think a lot of people may not really be into that. I'm really curious. I'm really curious about the genre lately. So I watched it, and they did a really interesting thing that I hadn't seen others do, which was I'm not that versed. I've seen one other Screen Life movie and a short segment in an anthology. But one thing they did that I thought was really clever was they tell the story as the characters are going through this little point and click video game. So, and you know, I'm into the kind of classic point and click games that are a bit horror-y. So that kind of, that kind of sets something off going on there. The plot is two friends in the 90s, one's moved away, call each other on a sort of Skype-esque app, and they go through this little point and click game that seems a bit scary, but might be connected to their friend. Now, this is a movie that does quite a bit with a little. Of course, it's, one shot because of it's a webcam and just through the games. But the game, because a lot of these movies are just one shot through the webcam, the game adds a whole new level of visuals that I really appreciated. I thought it was good. It was getting under my skin. Especially because, I don't know, those early pre-rendered point-and-click games, something about them. It has that kind of look. It looks better than the time, but it has that feel. And that got to me. I liked it even though the ending didn't went a little bit too far to me. I wasn't too into the ending, but it was entertaining on the trip there. So I think Deadware, it's recent too, it's from 2021, is worth a try. I liked it, but I'm kind of getting into Screen Life. It's something I'm interested in. And I think it's a genre that some people might not be into, so check it out if you're interested. Now next up, I also saw with my girlfriend The Fly. She really wanted to see the Jeff Goldblum 1980s Cronenberg The Fly. But I'm kind of into classic horror movies. I should stop saying kinda, it's a bad habit. I am into classic golden era horror movies. So I was urging her, come on, we gotta see the original. And I was right, we did gotta. And I'm glad we did. I was expecting a sort of cheesy movie. I was expecting a black and white movie where at the end of the first act, the fly, the girl's wondering, oh, where's my husband? Cue the fly, big head, hand like a fly. I was expecting that. Sting, scream, but it's not that kind of movie. Now, one thing, I had seen a lot of Fly parodies where, like The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, we were watching that, where Bart's mind, his head gets on a fly's body, and their mind is swapped. Bart is on a fly. So I was expecting like that. But it wasn't actually. It's more bodily. The doctor's mind is still, for the most part, intact, but his head is on a fly. So the doctor is still conscious, but he has a fly head. And I know that sounds really cheesy, like a 50s horror, like the era, but it really held up. It's framed by kind of like a mystery, and then it goes into a story with a really surprising concentration on the perspective from the wife, and it's existential about what the atoms that make us up, and even a little bit about our own consciousness, because the fly, the man with the fly head is beginning to lose his human sensibilities. He's beginning to think like a fly, and that's a bit scary that his cognition is kind of going, and it toys around how much of a human is physically human, how much of our mind makes up us. It was a surprisingly intelligent movie. I expected something schlocky, but I was pleasantly surprised. And of course it has Vincent Price, which is a plus for me as a classic horror fan. But yeah, The Fly original, the poster is like, has a big fly. I expected some cheesy monster movie, but it was pretty intelligent. And going into the next day, going into the Fly remake, watching it with her, I was also pleased to see of course, it's a body horror movie. I skimmed over the plot, but who doesn't know it? Teleportation machine experiment goes wrong. Man becomes fly. There it is. Now, the Fly movie from the 1980s is a Cronenberg movie, so you should expect some body horror. And one thing that I did think that I expected was I thought he'd come out of the teleporter with a hand and of a fly and then gradually transform. But no, it's really, really gradual, down to the hairs. And that's one thing I can say about both of these movies that I liked. They had a good build-up. They had a good build-up where you get to know the characters and then it hits the fan. And so that definitely helped The Fly. Both. And the remake has really good characters. I was getting really into the characters, especially Jeff Goldblum playing Brundle, who he really sells the unique mannered doctor. I don't think the character could be the same without him. And of course, the body horror is, well, horrifying. It's what Cronenberg is known for. And one thing I liked about this remake a lot is it takes the premise and steers it in a completely new direction. You get a completely different movie from the original, but at the same time, you get some similar ideas. But one thing that also, like, especially with the girl character, it goes, I don't want to spoil too much, but it goes kind of in a way like, well, I'll leave you to find out. But they do a really good job with the woman characters and certain aspects of femininity. But one thing that I was left missing from the original was the sense of existentialism that this one didn't really go in, that this one didn't have as much of. Now, Brundle still starts thinking like a fly, but as body horror, it's a much more physical movie. And I really liked the original. The original just did it for me. And maybe it's because I'm a classic horror fan. Maybe that edges it out for me. But, I mean, what's the point comparing them? They're both great. I love them both as much. And I love that they do different things. So they're both worth a watch. They take a premise and go two different ways. I mean, I compare them, but they're really their own thing. So they're both two watches that I enjoyed. But I can't say the same about the next movie I saw, which was The Fly 2. That is the sequel to The Fly 80s. And Cronenberg didn't work on this one. Not surprising considering its quality. Really, the only reason I saw this with my girlfriend was because we couldn't stop laughing at the tagline, like father, like son. If you know the original movie, you know that can't mean anything good because it proposes a conflict, a story that makes no sense at all in terms of the characters. So we were really curious about The Fly 2. And, well, the story makes no sense to go on from the first movie, and it's just a completely dull story. I watched this and I asked her, did this come to theaters? Because it really looked like a VHS movie. The quality was so low. You don't get the lighting, like the flash of the teleporters and the deep shadows in the background of his laboratory from the original. It's all gray. The shadows are so simple. It looks cheap. And it doesn't help that there aren't that many outside shots. It takes place in this facility that is only just ups the gray to 11. It's just so bland, so dull going around little hallways, and I was shocked. And it wasn't even that amusingly bad. In fact, the story was pretty much, like I said, it didn't make sense off of the original. It's an insult to it. Just nothing works for it. And in fact, by the end, it becomes just pretty much a bloody, kill this guy. No intelligence at all from the original or the one before this. I can't say it's a disappointment because we watched it because it was bad. Well, I can because it wasn't even amusingly bad. All around, just a husk of the one before it. Oh, also before I move on to the next one, just wanted to say that I got the Fly collection. It's out of print on Shout Factory. It went out of print a few months ago, so I saw it for cheap and, well, reasonably cheap. It will be cheap compared to the price hikes that are probably coming. And I wanted to get this because maybe I'll review all of them one day. I'm exploring longer videos, so you might see something on the Fly, or at least a comparison between the two. So, hey, just wanted to show this off. Now, next up, we watched The Babadook. Now, for those who don't know The Babadook, it is one where the mom reads a story to their child about the Babadook, and then the Babadook begins haunting their home. And I won't give much more about that because it goes in depth about, it's a really emotional story about a mother coping with her abnormal kid and also coping with her dead husband that she doesn't want to talk about. And all these factors essentially tear apart her life. And then the haunting happens. I don't want to go too much more into it because it's a pretty deep movie. It's really thoughtful. And that was one of the things that set me off about it at first. Because I first heard about this movie with the term elevated horror. Yes, I heard it. I heard this mentioned in one of the recent Scream movies, calling it an elevated horror film. An elevated horror is a term that I don't really like because it seems hoity-toity. Like, oh, well, I like horror movies, but I don't like horror movies like that. This is intelligent, pinky out. Like, it's... So I'm not fond of the term, but I am fond of Babadook. I was kind of entered in a bit critical of that term, and yeah, I still liked Babadook. It's still horror, though. I'm not going to say elevated horror, even though it is really intelligent. I won't take that away from it. It's a really deep, metaphorical movie, and I think you should watch it because it has good horror, and it's really interesting about the mom and child. An emotional movie too. That's really scary. In fact, what made us watch this is because we were marathoning the Treehouse of Horrors, which, if you don't know, is a series from The Simpsons. Every Halloween, they do 3 little skits parodying horror movies, or at least they should. In the middle seasons, they parodied Avatar for some reason. Look, they started off great, hit a dry spell, and then somehow in like the 2 seasons ago, they parodied the Babadook, call it the Poopadookie or whatever, and we were laughing. It was pretty great. It was like, wow, we woke up. It's like, wow, why did they get good all of a sudden? So that motivated us to watch the Babadook. And just to kind of lightly cover the Treehouse of Horror, because that was a big part of my Halloween this year with my girlfriend. It actually got a little bit intimidating. I won't say scary because it's mostly funny, of course. But when you watch all of them, you'll realize they forgot what made Treehouse of horror. And it's that little bit of threat. And they introduced that back in around that season. So, hey. But this is about the Babadook, I guess. I don't know what else there is to say. I liked it, so I think you should watch it. It was a good one. Now, next up was... I can't mention that because it's one that I'm saving for my video. So I'll skip up to the next one. Zombie Flesh Eaters. Zombie Flesh Eaters is one I saw on TV a little bit as a teenager. For some reason, my dad seemed to know quite a bit about Italian movies. It might have been their grasp on horror at the time, maybe their presence in video. He didn't go to the theater that much. Well, he did to the drive-ins. Or not the drive-ins, the little cent theaters, the nickel theaters, to see low budget movies. Maybe that's why he knew about some of these stuff. But I don't know. I just remember spaghetti westerns and some of these. We saw a little bit of these on TV. And one of them was zombie flesh eaters. And there is one scene, maybe a few scenes if you've seen it, that you won't forget. In fact, my girlfriend, I guess I'll cover the story first. It's a zombie outbreak. They go on an island, find out that the zombie outbreak originated there. And, well, what else? It's a zombie movie. And my girlfriend knew about the bit where the zombie fights the shark, and which I didn't know about. I was like, what? And then I saw it, and I'm like, oh my god, that's insane, a zombie fighting a shark. But I knew about the eyeball scene, and she didn't. So there was both this kind of suspense for, oh, wait until the other sees this. And Zombie Flesh Eaters is, like I said, it's a small Italian movie, but it has a zombie fight the shark pretty early on. So they do stuff to hold you over until the end, where it just goes crazy. And the brutal effects, are really eye-catching. It's a simple movie, but it still holds up. It's still enjoyable. Speaking of still holds up, this was the third time, kind of fourth, but this is the third time that I've watched The Blair Witch Project. Now, The Blair Witch Project, I don't know what else to say. You know what it is. You know what I think of it if you've seen my review, but my girlfriend didn't know. Well, she knew what it was, but she had never seen it. So it was an enjoyable time sharing it with a new viewer, kind of like sharing this horror that is classic that I love and hearing what she thinks of it. Of course, she loves it, and it was a really good movie still. I was worried that after, I was like, oh, I've seen this a few times. How much will the horror hold up? But it still did, and the characters still hold up. I guess I'll say something I didn't in my review, which I thought it was really interesting seeing the power of authority kind of shift. Like when they listen to the person with the map, but when the map goes missing, that's when I think it really gets chaotic between the characters. That's when things really break down. And I was thinking more about the line of when Josh grabs the camera and he says, I see why you find so much comfort in this thing. It's not like reality. It doesn't show things as they are. It's like a filtered reality, which really almost like foreshadows some of the ideas in Blair Witch 2, and which is a sequel, if you've also seen my review of, I find quite fascinating. It's that line, and to think that line wasn't scripted, it's a line that really makes you think about the comfort of the cinematic lens, especially in stuff like this, which is posed as real, how much comfort the lens brings. And that's not, he's looking through the lens, but we're watching it on like a TV. So that's like even more layers of like protection we have as viewers. So it just made me think about the comfort you have in watching something, even if it's true, like how the process of film editing and makes it digestible for us, even if it is like horrific. Of course, the Blair Witch is fake, but a lot of people at the time didn't know. And perhaps that lens kind of helped it be digestible for people, even if they were in belief of it's real. Just an interesting thought, an interesting line that wasn't even planned. Definitely one that sticks out. And next up is another classic, The Exorcist. Of course, girl gets possessed, call in the exorcist, although that kind of jumps to the end. One thing that I liked about this movie that surprised me, I know it's based on the book, but it seemed ahead of its time in its criticisms of the medical field. Now, the doctors see the possession and they think it's something with her brain. And it's only aged better understanding some of the silly thoughts doctors had, professionals had about the brain. And of course, they're professionals in their field, but the fact is that like science is only like a product of the time. So even if like it's something where you think, oh wow, like this commentary on over medication, like, and like over diagnosis, because the doctors didn't know what was wrong with her, and they're coming up with all these theories and different tests, and it's aged well in terms of its criticism. I think it's aged well because it's kind of about not knowing. And as we've progressed, we realized, hey, they didn't really know what was what back then. Now, the priest or father of the town, the priest, he's like, it's something they call a certain term to it in the movie. I'm trying to remember, but anyways, you know who I mean. His mother dies, and it's a lot about his grief too and his guilt. So I really, almost beyond the horror, I enjoyed it almost more as a drama about him. I guess if this came out now, little film students would call this elevated horror. But no, good character writing, drama, and good conflict existed long before that. It was long before they were born. I'm being kind of a jerk, but I'm really not. I'm really not fond of the term elevated horror. But yeah, one thing I will say that I wasn't so fond of the movie was it wants you to think in an open mind. The medical field seems true. We've aged out. We've edged out the age of religious beliefs, exorcisms. But what if? And I find that interesting, except for one thing. They show her bed shaking about, her head spinning, vomiting, telekinesis. Well, if this existed, I wouldn't have to open my mind. It'd be real easy to believe in possession. And that's kind of that's the thing about it, that it wants you to open your mind, but by introducing these elements, you kind of I flipped a switch to be like, oh, okay, well, this is fantasy. I have to watch this if this were believable. I like its theme of opening your mind, but I think that I need to stop saying kind of. I think that doesn't do it for me. But that's probably that's a more interesting criticism that I should cover another time, unless I'm satisfied with how it came out here. But I don't want it to overshadow the actual like good characters of the movie, because I just still enjoyed it. It's just that nugget of thought really intrigued me while watching it. One I'll probably talk about more. Now, next up, maybe you should pause the video, try to guess it, because I know you won't. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein. This was a little 2000s era cartoon, and the only reason I watched this is because I told my girlfriend I remember seeing on Cartoon Network or something a little bit of Alvin and the Chipmunks where Theodore becomes a wolf man. That's the sequel. So we thought, well, let's watch the first one, Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein. And it started off, it was surprisingly entertaining for what it was. Now, it starts off with Alvin and the Chipmunks causing chaos at an amusement park, kind of parody of Universal Parks, and they stay there overnight. But the actor who plays Frankenstein in the parks gets kicked out, and this doctor is trying to create a real Frankenstein for the parks. So Dave, their owner, goes there. I shouldn't say owner, more like father. Dave goes to the park because the chipmunks stayed late and they're getting chased by Frankenstein, so that's a bit silly. And Dave meets the Mad Doctor, who the Mad Doctor's motivations are really confusing because he already got the job done. He made a Frankenstein, but he tries knocking out Dave to do some experiment on him. They don't really elaborate on what per se, so that's kind of silly because you have this doctor trying to kill Dave. But then they go home around the second act, and Frankenstein comes to the house, and oh, he's real friendly. We gotta make Frankenstein some friends. We gotta teach him how to make friends. And I was thinking, okay, here's what's gonna happen. Dave is like, oh, what, you hid this monster here? What? No, out. Cue sad music. Frankenstein walks out like a puppy, a sad puppy, and then later he saves Dave and they realize he's cool. Doesn't happen. In fact, around the time where they're teaching Frankenstein to make friends, the plot soon after just forgets about Frankenstein. It's like it knew it was boring. The writers knew it was boring, so they're like, oh, we don't want to write about that. So for some reason, the Mad Doctor changes motivation, and instead of wanting Dave, he steals Alvin and puts this serum in him that makes him turn into a Looney Tune at this film premiere. And I don't even know why, because the Mad Doctor hates the cartoon raccoon or whatever, or squirrel of the park's mascot. But he makes Alvin just a cartoon, even though I thought he hated him, or maybe it was to make a new mascot. I don't know. It's to be real silly. And Alvin goes around the premiere with a toony chainsaw, and I'm like, I'm in. And as if the writers didn't find Frankenstein boring enough, he's just not in the third act. The very namesake of the movie just leaves in the third act. They're like, he's boring. I don't care about him. Do you care about him? And I didn't. I wanted to see Alvin cause chaos like a Looney Tune. So that was fun. Of course, Frankenstein shows up at the end like, oh, I was here too. You know, didn't really matter. Just, I'm probably overselling it, but I was surprised how entertaining it was. Just a pretty silly plot. Now, next up, we saw The Wolfman. Alvin and the Frankensteins. Sometimes I love doing impromptu videos. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman. Now, Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman was kind of the quote-unquote main event. Not really of Halloween, but it's why we watched Meet Frankenstein. And I was hoping to see a bit like, oh, I remember that as a kid. And part of what I remember as a kid is barely seeing it. Because as a kid, you see stuff like Scary Godmother a lot every Halloween. Great special. Love it. And I'm happy I showed it to my girlfriend last year. Great special, Scary Godmother. And Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman was something I only remember seeing once. So what I remember is not remembering it. So that it had this odd place in my mind. So I wanted to watch it. And Alvin is obsessed with monsters. That's kind of fun, I guess. It's okay. His neighbor is a wolf man, but no one will believe him. Kind of cliche, episode-y plots that, you know, like when Frankenstein, they were like, let's make him some friends. Boring plot, but that last movie knew it. This one was kind of cliche, and you know, it was to be expected. One thing I will give it, it had the Chipettes, which I enjoyed. They were fun. But otherwise, just what you expect. If you are going to watch a movie, I'd say watch that. Watch Meets Frankenstein over Wolfman. But I don't think, for some reason, I don't think my viewers will be that eager to watch either. But I will say one thing about this, and it goes back to Scary Godmother, is I like that this came out after the show, like after the show was canceled for a bit. Those two came out, and I miss the era where little cartoon specials, Halloween specials, or just any special can exist. And I don't know, do kids even have that anymore? I know TV's a really different space now with streaming, and the emphasis on franchises has only increased. So do kids even have individual, like, standalone Halloween specials, or any specials like Scary Godmother? Or I'll take even this. I liked seeing the old 2000s animations because it's in that era where it's shifting to digital but doesn't look cheapo. They haven't realized that they could completely change their methods and make cheapo animation yet. So it still looked good. I just, you know where I stand, I guess, just from that. Next up we watched is VHS Beyond. Now, VHS is a series that I've seen all of. In fact, my girlfriend was going through the series a while back, and it became a tradition of us when once it hit VHS, the second one on Shudder, VHS 95, I forget. It's kind of confusing when the Shudder series trilogy, the 80s, 90s trilogy, because they jump dates, so it's not like a linear countdown. But we started on the second one of that. They're just fun movies. Anthology movies where someone, anthology found footage movies, and anthologies are just fun. I find the little stories really digestible, just a fun watch. And I was having to make a tradition out of it lately, since they've annualized them, watching them with my girlfriend. And they're really enjoyable. Of course, they're individual pieces that may vary in quality, but they're usually pretty solid. Although the last one in the sort of 80s, 90s trilogy, I wasn't too big on, which kind of made me scared for this one a bit, because I was like, oh, they're keeping this going. I thought they'd take a break. And it's called VHS Beyond because it's supposed to have a sci-fi theme. So I was like, oh, is that a bit constraining? But no, most of these shorts had to do with aliens. One of them was very weird and didn't have to do with sci-fi at all. But the rest, one, I won't spoil one, but most of them had to do with aliens. And that might sound bad, but they're all varied. None of them felt too samey despite having similar subject matter. So my skepticisms were disproven, and I was glad. I was like, wow, this is a step up from the last one. I enjoyed it. One has this great found footage skydiving scene, super exciting. And one thing I love about it is it's in a blue sky, orange field, clear day. So you see the monster for what it is. They had confidence. You didn't have to shroud it in mist, put it at nighttime or whatever. They had confidence in their horror, and I like that. The first segment was really exciting. Had a chainsaw in it, Zombies 2, and that one, it really contrasts the last one, because that one is, an action-y movie, an action-y segment short. But the last one it only has one camera perspective, and it's, I won't spoil too much about it, but it's really about observing an interesting phenomenon. And a lot of these other ones, even before VHS, try to be really exciting. This one was really low-key, with that build-up, and it knew that darkness is scary. You don't have to see so much pop in your face. You don't have to know exactly what's going on. You don't have to... It knew the low-key horror is still eerie. So that last one got me. That last one was really good. And next up, we watched The Abominable Dr. Phibes, another classic movie from 1971, and it stars Vincent Price as this killer. And one thing I remembered about it was some of the devices he used, because it reminds me of Saw. I'm a pretty big Saw fan, and this is Proto-Saw. Now, I haven't seen the sequel, but some of the stuff I remember about the devices he builds, I think I'm remembering some of the sequel. But still, it becomes really Saw, especially by the end of the first one. The Abominable Dr. Phibes, a revenge killer story that is really artistically extravagant. He has this sidekick who doesn't really speak. There's a lot of mystery to her. In fact, one of my favorite, it's a really simple movie. It's just this death, then this death, then this death. The cops try to find him, but they're really incompetent at it. So Dr. Phibes really steers the movie. And one of my favorite things about this movie which the right side of my brain, I forget, I think it's the right side, that's supposed to be logical, wants to call out, where between his killings, he does artsy little visual plays and like plays the organs not organs, the organ piano with little, what are they called, animatronics, really artsy. And other stuff where he does little almost play-like performances with his sidekick, and I loved it. It's such a visual like pleasure, but it adds nothing to the plot. But there's an intrigue to this character and such a command of interesting visuals there and shadows, like one bit where he holds the necklace up to his wife's photo, but it's not like the necklace is on her, the shadow is on her. Just really good visuals that that I just enjoyed looking at. Really operatic acting, just really interesting character. He's not just hard to show on this camera with my how high up it is, but not just organ playing, like raising his hand, slamming it down, stuff that doesn't make sense but comes off really pleasing as a silhouette on camera. Just got a kick out of that movie. It just did it for me, even though I know it's more like artsy. Its artsy side more did it. Now, next up, we saw Scooby-Doo meets the Booze Brothers. Yeah, quite a list I have here. I was scared going into Scooby-Doo meets the Booze Brothers. That makes me sound like a baby. I wasn't scared of the content. I was not scared of Scooby-Doo. Don't tell people that. I was scared because a few years ago, we had watched Ghoul School, which this is part of a Shaggy Red Shirt trilogy, where it's just Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy. And, I should also mention, with the Blair Witch Project, we saw the Scooby-Doo Project, a parody that aired in commercials on the Scooby-Doo marathon in Cartoon Network just a few months after the Blair Witch, where it's pretty much the Blair Witch but with Scooby-Doo, found footage and everything. That was really funny, really surprising that they did that at the time, really entertaining. Look up the Scooby-Doo Project, it's fun. Kind of funner than Booze Brothers, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Ghoul School is a good movie. Well, I enjoy it. It's kind of a classic. I saw it on Cartoon Network a lot. And it's pretty much like 3 episode plots stitched together. That's Ghoul School. It's entertaining, but, well, it's pretty much 3 episodes stitched together, like, at least structurally. It didn't exist as a show, but structurally 3 separate plots. And then we watched Scooby-Doo, Reluctant Werewolf, where Dracula wants to erase Shaggy, and if Shaggy wins, he stops being a werewolf. That movie sucked. That movie was awful. In fact, the Blu-ray comes with Scooby-Doo Goes to Hollywood as an extra. You're buying that Blu-ray for Scooby-Doo Goes to Hollywood. Reluctant Werewolf's the extra. Not worth watching, And that came out after Meets the Booze Brothers. But somehow, Reluctant Werewolf looks worse. Meets the Boo Brothers is an alright movie. Unlike both, where they're kind of segmented into 3 areas, Reluctant Werewolf is a little bit more focused, but they drag out each plot point to where it's like, it's this segment, then this segment. Booze Brothers is focused because Shaggy inherits a plot of land from his uncle, and he wants to find the diamonds in it. And you get some crazy scenes like this hillbilly girl who has a crush on him, this guy who's feuding with his family who tries shooting him, and the ghosts. And they call the Boo Brothers, which are pretty much Ghostbusters, which I found surprising. I thought they'd be the antagonists of the story, but no, it seems like I thought they would be like pranking them pranking Scooby and Shaggy, but they're actually trying to help them. They're like his friends, even though the intro paints them like they're really a force to be reckoned with. But they're goofballs. They're pretty much the Three Stooges, like almost literally like their characters one for one. And this movie had the most focused plot of the Shaggy Red Shirt trilogy, but because of that, it was just, hey, this riddle shows us where the next diamond is. Walk, 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 solves the riddle. Hey, a diamond. Oh no, a ghost. And then the Boo Brothers do little Three Stooges gags. It was really redundant. I like that it was a focused story compared to the others, but it ended up dragging out because they had to follow this one plot line. And although I enjoyed some of the craziness at the beginning, it was still had some enjoyable moments. It was pretty redundant, but it was better than Reluctant Werewolf, but not as good as Ghoul School. And then next up, we watched kind of more exploring the kiddie area of horror more. Mad Monster Party? It has a question mark in the title. This is a Rankin Bass production, so it's claymation, like, or stop motion, or whatever you want to call it. Sorry. My girlfriend will be mad. I called it something wrong. But anyways, it's like those little Rudolph stop motion animation movies. So the characters look really appealing, and it's a fun movie for what it is. Well, interestingly, the main character is a human nephew of Frankenstein, and he disappears for quite a bit of the movie. In the chunk of the middle where it's just the monsters goofing around and doing gags, which is quite a bit of the movie, it is what it is. It's a product of its time. It's enjoyable for what it is. This is one of the rare feature length Rankin Bass productions, so keep that in mind. But I still found it pretty enjoyable for what it is. I love seeing these cute characters, and stop motion is a really admirable art, so I got that out of it. It's a cute, enjoyable one that I don't hear many people talk about because maybe because Rankin Bass is so associated with Christmas. But hey, this is a fun one. Now, I'm not at the end of October just yet. Today we watched Over the Garden Wall, a mini-series that is really mysterious, really dark. It's a cartoon and a enjoyable mini-series that is both funny but also pretty dark, surprisingly dark. It gets pretty heavy by the end. And I want to watch Mr. Sardonicus, a movie with an interesting gimmick at the end because it's a William Castle black and white movie. He's known for his gimmicks in film. And so I'm hoping to watch Mr. Sardonicus because I kind of get into that cheesy old black and white horror movies. So I'm hoping to watch that, but maybe I won't. We'll see. Maybe I'll comment some of the movies I saw after I filmed this video. But anyways, I'm running out of time on my recording. Not like that matters. I can switch battery, but hey, I hope I wrap this up soon enough because I feel like I'm not terse enough in my videos that, or at least my impromptu ones, that I could shorten them. So I hope this one is an easy one to shorten. I hope it's pretty fun to watch, digestible, and I hope you saw some that you might want to check out on your own. And I hope you check out my next big video, my real huge video for me on several found footage movies. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope any newcomers stick around, and I will see you next time. Enjoy your Halloween!